So we wanted to tell you a little bit more about the Canyon grinders. We have three main grinders. We have the BC66, which comes in the Grand, as you can see here. The Grand stand has a stand on it, so it makes it look about twice as tall. And the stand is mainly for storage. Also, if you want to set bags underneath it or small containers. Then we have the BC110 over here. And then if you look to the far right, the new BC132. The 110 and the 132 are 220 models because of the high wattage. They're very productive models for industrial use. For most small businesses, you're going to be sticking with the BC66. And just wanted to show you how these set up and how you adjust the settings, because there's 12 grind settings on them, and within that there's numerous micro settings. So we're going to take a closer look at that and see how that's. So this is the BC66, and the BC66 Grand stand operates the same way. They have basically a free floating adjustment knob, so when you first turn it on, you'll want to turn it to the setting to where it begins to sound like the burrs are clipping each other, just so you know where your start point is. So I'm opening this up quite a bit. I'm turning it on now, and I'm adjusting this setting. And as you might be able to see on this particular model, the 1 is right here. So you can hear it beginning to grind, so you want to take it so that the burrs are not grinding. And then this can pretty much determine where your setting's going to be. So on this particular model, your 1 would be right here. And so if you're following the general guidelines of setting your grind that's highlighted in our setup guide, you would adjust it from this point right here. And some people will just, what they'll do is take a Sharpie or something like that and put a permanent little mark right here to indicate that's the starting point. I don't know how well you can see, but I put a little mark right there. And so therefore, when you do your grinding, you would adjust it, that being the 1. So if you were looking to do like a number 2 or a number 3 grind, you would turn this to number 2, that to number 3, and you would make the adjustments otherwise. So what we'd recommend most people to do when they first get their grinder is set it up, which is pretty much just putting the hopper on it. On the BC66, you're plugging into a typical 1 line. Maybe just get an ounce or ½ ounce of coffee. You could do this with a ½ pound and just adjust it accordingly, but I'm just going to do it with about an ounce or ½ ounce at a time. I'm going to pour it into the hopper. I'm going to go ahead and turn the setting to the original 1 that I had. Turn it on. And what you're going to see here is basically a very, very fine grind at that 1 to where it would be almost Turkish, not quite Turkish. So let's bump it down to a little less than 1, and we'll pour another ½ ounce into the grinder. And of course, most people would never even grind Turkish coffee because it's basically a powder. But I'm going to turn this down to, it'll be a little less than 1, maybe a ½ Turn that on. And now you can see that powder, which would qualify as a Turkish grind. So you can adjust that. You can mark that down on your records. A half or 3/4 of a setting would be Turkish, and then 1 would be a very fine setting. Let's go ahead and take it up to about 1.5, and let's see what that produces. I might add at this point that one reason why people would buy these industrial grinders, obviously the obvious reason is you're grinding lots of coffee. But another one is the very light roasted coffee is becoming very popular. Even what's called white coffee, which is a super light roast. Most grinders would wear out very quick grinding white coffee. These are designed where they can handle grains and everything else, so they're very capable of handling white coffee and very light coffees. So that was our 1.5, and now you're getting into like an espresso. I'm going to bump it up and do a 2.5 and a 3.5, maybe a little bit more, just so you can see what the differences are, and then I'll put it out on a white sheet so you can kind of see the difference. So I now have it set up for 2.5. And now you're getting closer to what most people would use for drip coffee. There's variations in that on what people will do. Let's go ahead and turn it up to 3.5. Now you're getting into a much more coarse, like what you might use in cold brew. Let's go ahead and turn it up to about 4. Man, let's go ahead and go with 4.5. See what happens with that. Yeah, so 4.5 would be closer to what you would get in a French press. Now, after mentioning all those numbers, I'm going to show you what the grinds look like. But unfortunately, because the grinders are different, like for example, you see here, if I don't know how well you can see it, this is the burrs for the BC66. Now let's compare it to the burrs in the BC 110 and 132, and so your settings are going to be somewhat different, and we'll look at those in just a moment. So I just took a bunch of pictures, and they may not be very good because the lighting's not too great in here, of the different grinds going from about that 1/2 to 3/4 all the way up to 4.5 on our BC66, so you can be able to see the variation in grind. But we encourage you to do that test as well, because there's a difference between the 110 and the 132. We're going to have to redo that to show you. So let's focus in on the 110, which should be comparable to the 132. But again, we encourage you to do your own testing. Okay, here's the BC Canyon 110. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to open that up all the way. I'm going to turn it on, and I'm going to find out where our point of entry or start point is. So in this model, 1 is about right here. So I'm going to mark that, just for my own personal record, since these have floating knobs. And then we're going to do some different roasts, ranging from about 1/2, again up to about, well, we'll see up to maybe a 3 or so on this one to see how it looks and compare that. Remember to open up the latch when you begin to do this test. So there we are, and that's again very comparable to a, don't know if you can see it very well there, but to a Turkish, and we'll compare it in a moment to the other one. Now we're going to do another one at about 1.5. We'll do 1.5, see how that looks, and then see what variation we need to go at. So there was 1. Let's take it up to 1.5. Okay, 1.5 is probably more like an espresso on that, and I'll try to show you that in just a bit. We're going to do, we're going to go ahead and jump all the way up to 2.5 on this, and I'm doing both these tests with about a 1/2 pound of coffee. So that's a little bit more than, well, can't remember what I just, let's go ahead and do it at 2, just because I'm losing track of what I'm doing. So now a 2 is still a really fine grind, maybe for like K-cups. Let's go ahead and take it up to 2.5 and see what we got. And basically, a half pound of coffee, you'll be able to do all the testing you need to do to determine what your settings are going to be. So that's 2.5. Still a really fine grind, maybe for like a K-cup. Again, some people in their drip coffee makers will like that 2.5, but I'm going to go up to just up to 3 and see what that looks like. Okay, so the 3 is definitely getting into the drip coffee maker type, and we're going to take it up a couple more notches for you. So I had to switch to another coffee, Columbia Supremo, which is a darker roast, because I ran low on that. So we had it on 3. I'm going to take it to 3.5. 3.5. Still in that drip, or maybe more toward a percolator, but I mean, it depends on what you like to choose. I'm going to take it up to 4 now, and then 4.5, and see what we get with that. So this is on 4. Oops. 4. Yeah, now we're definitely looking at 4 cold brew, and I'm going to guess 4.5. So the numbers aren't totally different from the BC 66 to the 110, but there is some slight variations. And the best thing for you to do is when you get your unit, this is 4.5, for you to give it that half pound test and determine what works for you. And then remember, yeah, we're looking at 4.5 is definitely getting into that French press. Remember that there's the bolt underneath that when you want to set it and do large quantities and you don't want the vibration to move this at all, that you would use a hex key. It might be a number 4 hex key, metric, and tighten that down, and it will stay set on the setting that you want.